Hi, I'm Dusty, and welcome back to my lab. Today I have my second conversation to share with you that I had with Theepan, aka Nexus Void, on YouTube. We talk largely about the shadow in a Jungian sense, and then kind of in a new formulation that we're kind of working together on making. Um, Theepan does a great job of kind of like rallying me and getting me out of left field, running around in circles, screaming at the clouds. I trail off a couple times and completely, fragment and tangent myself into a hole. But I think I'm just going to leave it in anyway. So without further ado, hopefully you find the conversation interesting and take care. Okay. And we are now recording, man.
There we go. Awesome.
All right. So, how have you been? Everything been
pretty
all right?
good. Yeah, I'm actually back in classes now, so that's why I've been kind of busy.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been good. I've been kind of slow with YouTube, but I'll probably pick up the pace a bit in a couple of weeks. But yeah, pretty good. Still doing the same stuff, still thinking about the same stuff. How have you been?
Good. Stuff is moving really, really fast. Had a lot of time to think though, still, because my new job is like very conducive to it, and I've been pretty motivated. I watched your last video through to fruition, and it might get a little bit confusing because, like, the way that I have terminology and how I talk about it might be a little bit different. So like, right. I kind of we kind of like conversed a little bit, just via text, like how we were gonna what we were gonna talk about and like how we were generally gonna go through the conversation. But kind of like the general idea is that we're trying to get down to like a more fundamental or more basic understanding of perhaps the shadow, and then like the other aspects of Jungian psychology, and maybe understanding them in different terms that make a little bit more like practical sense from my perspective. Right. And kind of like, from there, like, can we perhaps maybe pull out something that a lot of people I think have possibly missed? And like, I think that a big part of this conversation is going to be like, maybe not a criticism, but maybe a re-examining of the idea that, and like, maybe this isn't fully correct, is that in Jungian psychology, the idea is to identify, but then suppress the shadow. Like that's pretty much like the suppression aspect, like the like shadow work and like integration is like, it's a confusing concept to me. And like, I think that like, it can be often misinterpreted, like I might be doing, and then everyone has their own interpretation of it. And then, I mean, shadow work is very subjective in and of itself. So it's like, how do you really like have a recipe for success? And like, what is like the more fundamental aspect of the shadow? And like, what I'm going to try to make clear is like that I think that the shadow aspect of human beings specifically is so fundamental that the idea of suppressing it is just misguided. And that's exactly what the shadow wants you to think.
Right.
So, I mean, really, so, I mean, I wrote it up behind me, creation and its types. So like, I kind of, and I'm going to tie like this shadow concept and how we're going to think about it a little bit into the concept of creation in general, and how I see like human creation specifically, but you can see this in the animal kingdom too. Like none of this is like human specific. It's just humans take it to the next level. There's like a reductionistic type of creation. So like, I see it as tool making, technical, algorithmic, type of smarts and like and knowledge. And then there's create and like creation, knowledge, hand in hand, they're kind of similar. They're both beliefs, belief structures and whatnot. And then creation, that is that I don't really have the right word for it, but I'm like making up the word combinative, combinative, you know what I mean? Like, you kind of unconsciously combine a bunch of things together and you don't have as much intentionality or specific functionality in mind. It's a very different type of creation, like my juxtaposition is like, okay, this nut has a specific size and it has a specific function, will only work with a specific thread, whereas like a Jackson Paulette painting, the guy's plastered and he's, spraying paint all over a canvas and doesn't know how it's going to turn out. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then we look at it and everyone has a different interpretation of what it means, or like, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, so that's going to be kind of like the overarching idea of this. And then like, there's going to be a punchline about halfway through that I'm going to try to, drive through. But I'm interested, like, just like how you interpret, like how I just, you know, like kind of summed up my general premise and like what your take on it is, and how like you would interpret it with your own terminology.
Right. Well, if I'm going with like the Jungian way of thinking, it's not necessarily that. I mean, Jung didn't necessarily encourage us to suppress the shadow. What he recognized is that we have been suppressing the shadow for like most of history, because that's kind of like, we could say that like the main source of shadow repression has been religion, or at least for like a large part of human history. But then I'd say religion and society are very like intermingled, and so they can't necessarily be separated, at least for a huge chunk of human history. Those two things were like, bound together. Of course, like what religion does and what society does is create certain values and create certain ideas of what you're supposed to be. And then the shadow is everything that's not there. And then, so for most of human history, we've been repressing the shadow. What Jung came and realized is that the suppression of the shadow it doesn't destroy it. You can't negate the shadow. You can't negate something that's a part of you. In fact, your shadow gives you substantiality. So, the shadow is basically a consequence of the fact that we're conscious at all. Consciousness is this light that shines, illuminates things for us so that they can be known. But because of that, it creates a literal shadow, just as any source of light creates a shadow behind it. And of course, Jung's methodology was more akin to a sort of recognizing the shadow because most of the time the shadow is repressed because it's just simply denied. You just ignore that you don't want to acknowledge, for example, your dark traits, any sort of inferiorities. A good example, like if you're, I was watching like an episode of one of those Gordon Ramsay shows where he like goes into restaurants and just criticizes the shit out of them.
This is gonna be great.
Yeah, and there was this lady who just like wouldn't understand the fact that like her restaurant was terrible, and like he would keep explaining it to her, but she would just keep denying it. And that's a classic example of repressing something you don't want to look at, because it's, if you acknowledge that reality, it entails a kind of ego death, like because you perceive yourself as this amazing chef when it turns out that's bullshit. It's like you begin to question who you are, and of course your ego naturally resists that. Mm-hmm. Jung's sort of methodology was to the sort of goal of shadow work was to make very well conscious all of these shadow traits and everything which kind of persists. And of course, you saw the last video, so like you probably know like how I distinguish between the archetypal shadow as like a thing inside our minds, which is automatic and already there, and like and our personal shadows, which is kind of created by the fact that we have this archetypal shadow. And of course, those are kind of different. We should really treat those things as different concepts, because they're different in various different ways. One of them is very, because I remember you mentioned in one of your text messages, like the fact that society and dehumanization of other people, the archetypal shadow is very much a huge part of that. Arguably its function, like to identify the enemy, to identify the bad guy. But when we do that to ourselves, a part of ourselves also kind of falls into this bad guy spectrum, so that like we don't see ourselves as the full totality, but rather as this like idealization. So I think that clarifies a lot of like what we mean by shadow, and I'm pretty sure that's also what you think as well.
It's very close. And I want to like just a little bit more clarification, like what, like when we talk about the archetypal, collective unconscious shadow, like what is the most fundamental aspect? Is because like the drive, the feeling that I get is that it's almost like a rejection of animalistic tendency, like, and that's the fundamental aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But I think that the way that I'm thinking about it is a little bit different, and why I think it's more pervasive, and why I think that it's been a little bit sneakier. I think that like essentially that this is the idea, because the shadow is basically the judging, reductionistic, categorizing, takes in all the data and then makes a determination, which is, and we can talk about it hemispherically, at the brain, like the left hemisphere being more dominant in that regard. But regardless of the words, it doesn't really matter, because we have both halves of our brains right now. So yeah, but just speaking about it in just pure terms of like calculation, computation, like what is actually functionally going on, like, and what I see as being like the shadow aspect is this fundamental aspect of abstraction and reduction, because and cooking something down into its important bits, right. So like, and I think that this extends, and this is basically the fundamental tool, and what has kind of gone out of control with human beings, in the sense that like this judging, controlling, manipulating aspect is how we technology things into existence and basically orchestrate our lives now,
Mhm.
and like I think we touched on it a little bit in the last video, and I've talked with a lot of people since, but like the idea of being able to move more earth than you can comprehend, or that you're seeing at a time, and like and here's like the little punchline kicker, like that I think is really really interesting. I think that like in the same way that technology is a functional tool, okay, like any type of technology, like it's a nut, a bolt, whatever, right? An intentioned functional tool. Language is the same way, okay, and like in the same way that, I don't know if you saw my last video. Yeah, you did. You mentioned you saw it and
Yeah.
liked it. Yeah, like like in the aspect of humor, like we're all in on like a different aspect of the joke. Well,
Right.
we all have our own vocabulary and dictionary, and like it's amazing that we can exchange these abstract reduced
Yeah.
words that refer to like abstract concepts that don't, like, they're not even objects in the real world. Like the idea that like we look at a cube drawn like three-dimensionally on a flat piece of paper, and like our brain turns it in, like reduces it and turns it into, oh yeah, three-dimensional object, even though like in that situation it's almost like you're adding something, but really like maybe that's a bad example, maybe that's the opposite, you know what I mean? So like but just the general idea that like language itself is the shadow work, like like it's so fundamental, and especially if you look at like the human race, and just what we've done in relation to all other life, we reduce and they consume and destroy basically, and that's why I'm saying that it's in an imbalance right now. Like our sustainability is not on our minds. I think it ties back into to another concept that we touched on, that like human beings, when they're communicating one-on-one, are rational and respectful and yada yada, but you put them in a crowd and they act like a giant animal, like, and they're unpredictable, and then like, and that's this tendency to like elect leaders and like have some sense of, because there's too much going on, and there's too, and there, and in order for the analyzing, reducing mind to actually make sense of, and just like when you think about it this way a little bit, like the idea of shadow work and integration, I think, just gets so much more complicated, because like you can't just divorce yourself, or think of the shadow as being purely evil, or just something to repress, which, as you're saying, isn't really like the idea or the point. But like maybe we can better clarify like what exactly we're supposed to be doing, you know what I mean, when we're integrating the shadow, and like what like maybe what's more useful to think about or talk about. Because with what like the good with the good explanation that you gave me, I'm still have questions. I'm like, and I see this tendency to think that, oh yeah, we need to get back in touch with our humanity by rejecting our animalistic instincts. I think that this is also a big mistake. Like fundamentally, our animal instincts are, protect ourselves, protect our family, eat good food, have shelter, enjoy the outdoors, and just kind of experience the beauty of nature. But it seems like the shadows come in and say, oh no, you need to fear, you need to reduce, you need to categorize, you need to understand, you need to manipulate and control, and it's been the pressure of the natural environment on human beings. We're frail, physically speaking, so we need to compensate with our ability to tool make, but it's just we've gone too far down that path and have lost sight of the bigger picture, which is that we're not living beautiful lives, we're just living technical lives, that are just do this, do that, feel this, feel that, branding. Like, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about branding, because I think it's a good like practical real life example of like how you can see someone trying to shadow you into believing something, or like feeling a thing, because it's like, here's this collection of words and a picture and someone's face, and like, I want you to feel this or buy this or something, you know what I mean? And I just think that like, we're getting in the right direction with our discourse, in the sense that like, hey, we should have more sustainable technology, and like we should care more about the environment, but like there's still a lot of people who are very resistant, like to even opening their minds to the idea that every invention or every human creation isn't sacred. You know what I mean? Like people put human creation on a really high pedestal, and I just kind of like, I want to bring us back down to earth and just kind of realize that like, the most beautiful creations a lot of times are, and what I think is most human, is the ability to combine and hybridize these two types together, but we're too leaning in one direction right now.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense, some of that?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So you see like you see a strong connection between the shadow and sort of the invention and the creation of new technology. And that's like an archetype. One of the things Nietzsche said was, the serpent is like the oldest friend of knowledge. And that's, I mean, that's true. I mean, how I interpreted that, and I want to know what you think about this, is that like, for example, science, like for some reason, in like there's like a strong association between the devil and science, even though I wouldn't necessarily say that.
Yes.
But
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and
yeah.
that's exactly what I'm saying. Basically, you know, like science can it's about manipulation and understanding and function.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, and fundamentally, we don't really understand anything. You know, fundamentally, like we're, you know, we get close with quantum mechanics and like we have an idea, but you know, again, it's like Carl Sagan, before you can create an apple pie, you have to create the universe. It's like, as human beings and from our frame of reference, any scientific or engineering breakthrough that we have is built on a lot of non-understanding. You know, we don't understand everything most fundamentally, you know, and we can't agree on how we could even figure that out. And like,
well, another problem I think is that like how we is, I mean, we like what our intention is when we understand things. We don't like, I mean, most of the time I feel like we understand things so that like for the purpose of utility, but of course, what does utility mean? That means profit potentially. That means, you know, a lot of things. It's not necessarily understanding for the sake of understanding. It feels like it's understanding for the potential of being able to use this for ourselves. And of course that can be a good thing. Like for like, I don't know, like the invention of electricity is obviously, I mean, arguably been a good thing. It's like we're discussing, everything has a shadow side, because as we become, you know, the more dominant species, we improve our own lives, but at the expense of the lives of, you know, of nature itself, you know. So there's always this, the universe is weird. It's like this always like this good and bad pulling tension. Every time something good happens, it automatically creates its destructive opposite. And I guess that's just the way the universe is. I think I you know, there's a lot of different ways to think about the shadow. And of course we have our own shadows, like human nature has a shadow, but I also think the universe itself is kind of like, it kind of has a shadow nature built into it.
Sure.
And of course, I mean, that would make sense, because of course, if we have shadows, it's because we're tuned in to perceive something in our environment, which is also like of that nature. You know, one of the reasons we have two hemispheres is because reality seems to be construed in this way of connection and division. And so one of our hemispheres is good at division, the other hemisphere is good at connection. And so like obviously we tune into reality in that way.
Sure. And I think that, you know, that the creator and the destroyer, or the master and the emissary, right? So I don't know if you got to watch or if you know of Ian McGilchrist's work at all.
Yeah, I have his book right here. I've been reading like shit, like crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he's really, I think that he really is starting to get it. Like, or like I'm, you know, I'm getting him, or we're getting each other, you know, whatever you want to fucking say. You know what I mean? Like, just this, I mean, I'm also working on another video where I'm going to express my worry and my worry about, you know, okay, just to bring it back to the science example, data is a good example of this reductionistic, like, you know, quantitative, you know, outlook and way of looking at things. Like, kind of, you know, forget the qualia, forget the qualitative aspect of what's going on. You know, we have this tendency in science and in our digital and consumerist age right now, and, you know, capitalist, to think of everything as just a transactionally in, you know, in or out based on the numbers. And just you know, in that process and building up all of these abstract technologies, because I mean that's really what I mean. You know, in my belief is technology video, I try to talk about how, like, you know, in the same way that I just tried to explain that the words that I'm speaking are in some sense, you know, a reductionistic, you know, referential abstraction of like things that we've explained. You know, remember that light that shined into your skull that one time? You know, I'm going to use this word to basically, you know, bring up that. It's just like, it's so weird, you know. And then that whole aspect is just an abstract concept of like what you happen to attend to at that time. And just in this process, we have just gotten so jaded and so confused as to like what our most fundamental values are, you know. And then like I feel like the well gets poisoned with these ideas that like we need to reject our instincts, that our instincts are what are bad. Like I think that it's our ability to abstract and you know, force our ego into existence rather than, you know, just experiencing reality. That is the real problem, you know. You know,
we live too much in our head, so to speak.
Sure. Like, you know, I see, like especially in America, like narcissism and just egoism, and like all of this is tied back to materialism, I think, largely, you know. And it's so funny because you can talk about materialism and that, oh, he's very materialistic, he likes his toys and his boats and shit, but then
Mhm.
it's all like materialism means something in physics and in philosophy, where it's like, you know, everything is physical objects, but
Yeah.
there's a big parallel and like connectivity between this, like between these concepts, you know. And like we're so worried about, you know, here, this is very interesting. I think that, you know, that the fundamental aspect of what like true narcissism or egoism is that you will reject like new sense data to protect your abstract version of your ego, like
Mhm.
and you will try to force other people to believe this narrative, you know. And I see that as like being parallel to branding, you know. Like I'm working on a thought experiment where, you know, back in the day, like what could you brand? You branded your livestock, your cat, like your cows, your sheep, whatever. And then, like, you know, maybe in another scenario, if you're a cobbler or something and you're making shoes out of leather, you know, you start branding your shoes just because, you know, you want people to know that, yeah, I actually made this, right? And then like what inevitably happens is that then people get this emotional connection, you know, to the idea of the brand, you know,
Right.
of the craft and like the craftsman and his work. But
Yeah.
that's been completely hijacked, you know, like by all of our media and all of our advertising, and just like, feel that, you know, you want this feeling, go get this, you want to do this, go get that, you know.
Right.
It's like, rather than just kind of, you know, hey, I'm hungry, or, you know, that guy looks hungry, or like that, you look like you need to sleep, you know. What we're so focused, you know, then this focus aspect is, you know, part and parcel with, you know, with this whole idea too, like the reductionistic focus, attentive aspect, you know, like, and like the focusing of something into existence, you know, like that has function and intention, is like it's all wrapped up together. And like,
Mhm.
and right now we have just been riding this fucking train for so long here that we can't even see how far it's gone. You know what I mean? I mean, that's how I see it. And I think that, you know, we really need to start, I mean, this is where I'll tie it. You know, I think that the whole, like, you've heard the saying that the devil's, I told you the saying, the devil's biggest best trick was convincing people that he didn't exist.
Mhm.
Well, like, you know, I just see the irony in, like, in Jung, you know, I don't think that Jung ever referred to the act of writing or the act of, you know, just using words in general as being shadow work, you know, or like, or being of the shadow. But
Mhm.
like that's definitely how I see it, you know. Like you can, and this is the key, this is the kicker though, you know, in the same way that, all right, I can build this reduced intentioned functional machine like an excavator, and like, yeah, it moves way more earth than really it's, you know, than its entropy should allow it to, because it's a simple design and a simple machine that, you know, can create a lot of destruction. But you can also create, you know, ideally a sustainable situation that is in tandem, in, at least somewhat, with nature, and your basic human needs are met, you know. And it's like, but that's not how things are going right now, you know. There's
Mhm.
conversation about it, you know, and like there's all different types of excuses of why it's a, you know, a pipe dream or whatever. But it's like, I mean, I don't know. I think that we need to start getting better at understanding the different types of things that we like, what, like how we can classify, ironically enough, classify different types of creations, you know. And like how hybridized is it, and like, and just by analyzing that, I think that you can see a lot of the intent of the creator, you know, because it needs to be baked in, you know. And like, I feel like so much intent and like strategy is like is wasted on just trying to make you believe that you need or want something, rather than actually making it work right, you know,
Right.
and based on the efficiency or anything else. And like, if anything, like the efficiency with which it's built is only an advertising tactic in the first place, you know. And it's
Yeah.
just people are having such a hard time trusting, and, you know, maybe rightly so, because we're surrounded by our own shadow here, you know what I
Mhm.
mean. And it's like people don't know how to make sense of it. And like, I think they can't make sense of it because we're not thinking about it right. You know, like we and I want to tie it back finally to this, like the idea of Prometheus or Lucifer as being the fallen angel, you know. Like Prometheus is, it's their separate stories, but just like Prometheus is technology, but Lucifer, you know, basically rejects God and rejects his creation for what I think is his own creation, you know,
Mhm.
which is basically the ego or any abstract technological functional creation that human beings have created, you know. So it's just, we're so, it's so baked into us, you know, that like we need to, it's probably more, it's probably more the majority rather than the minority in our constitution, you know. Like, again, if you look at the plant, like if you look at it from the planet's perspective, we're a pestilence spreading over the planet, you know,
Mhm.
destroying, you know, complex creation. and just for our own abstract creation. And that's what's the biggest shame. Maybe at least if we had some really beautiful stuff, that was kind of unconsciously rendered or whatever, then it would be better. But we don't even like that's just hooey and nonsense to most, like 99% of people. Like, get a job, like, quit painting or whatever. Like, it's like, for why? I mean, like, before there was necessity and need, but like, we basically deleted that with our technology. But the problem is that we haven't had, like, our more basic technologies weren't ready, and now these are the consequences. Like, we have this facade or veneer of success and progress, but I think that it's, we threw the baby out with the bathwater, and we didn't even realize it.
Right.
So what do you think, man? Like, does that make a little bit of sense, or where does your mind go?
Well, I'm trying to. So again, when we were like talking about like the kind of how technology comes about and like our sort of over abstraction of things, and the fact that we're trying, like, I with respect to language, it's very much true that like language, as much as language reveals, it also conceals to a great degree, because you can't, again, it's like you were saying, like, the words that I'm using aren't necessarily this. The way I'm interpreting the words that I'm saying aren't necessarily the way that you interpret them to mean, and so there's this kind of like guessing game as to, like, hopefully, I mean, one of the things about communication is that like just speaking verbally itself. This is what, one of the things Miguel Crest talks about is that, like, just talking, using gestures, using our hand, and using our voice, like our prosody and our voice, also communicates information, which sort of clarifies what the specific words mean. But apart from that, getting back to what we were talking about before, you mentioned the on the whiteboard, the sort of the combinatory effect of our brains. So again, there's one thing in our brains that's kind of like separating and abstracting, and it doesn't live in the world, so to speak, but rather kind of lives in its own mental creation of the world using these words that we've designed, which aren't, the word tree doesn't refer to a specific tree. It refers to the general idea of a tree, but it doesn't even do that. It's just almost like the word itself becomes the object, and it's like, and so, so that's the kind of abstraction. But then there's this combinatory process. And I was wondering, what are this kind of relationship between these two things in the creation of any technology, or in the creation of anything in general? Because I see very inventive technologies as having this kind of again, like this automatic process in your brain, like it just kind of happens, and then like you have this amazing, like, you kind of just sit back, relax, you don't try to focus too hard, and then this idea comes to you like very spontaneously.
Yeah.
And that's how most like really cool things are invented and really cool ideas come about. They're really automatic. But of course, again, it's like you're saying before, there's this other process of this abstraction, of this like materialistic attempt to reduce everything and to make everything numerical. But of course, that also plays a role in technology, because as we were saying before, it's like the connection between Satan and science. So like, what in your opinion is the interplay between these things? Or like, what do you like? Because again, like, it's kind of a complex thing. So like, obviously they both have a function, right?
Sure. So I think that the fundamental problem is the algorithmic and technical aspect of certain types of creation. So like, the guy who designed and was thinking about, out of necessity, an excavator or something, because he's like, for whatever reason, I got to move a shit ton of land, and like, I only have this much time, and like, or is, it's just, he doesn't want to hurt his back anymore. And like, he has this vision of, maybe this hybridized, beautiful thing, okay, where I'm going to use this to move all of this earth and build this beautiful structure that will give warmth and happiness to this family, and live, coincided in the forest, and like, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it can have that vision, but then, this guy dies, or he sells his excavator, and like that, the tool is only as the tool can only make as beautiful of a creation as the wielder,
Right.
and like, but it has so much power, and I mean, you can see people wielding words which are very powerful incorrectly, and why we need to be so careful, like, all of these things are very powerful, but they don't, a lot of times you got to be careful, because they can be purely destructive, or like 99% destructive. I think that's a lot of things like that, like, okay, the gun is a good example. Like, it had a lot of functional utility, and helped a lot of people, for the original intention use, maybe, but like, or one person's intentioned use, but everyone has a different agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk about like hybridized versions, and like what I think is, that like our our cornerstone, or like our precious gem of like the only real thing that we have to bring to the table is this ability to use that judging algorithmic technical way of thinking and piecing out and pulling things apart, and then like I said, like use those tools to create something very beautiful. Like you make a paintbrush, like a set of paintbrushes, and then you can create a beautiful masterpiece. But it's just so many people have been have just lost sight of like what the hell they're actually trying to make. You know what I mean? One of my one very interesting professor I had, Michael Thompson, he still teaches here at Pitt, I believe. Been thinking a lot about like his one thought experiment, and he was talking about, and it's like it's very weird, but like, and I'm not even sure exactly where he was going with it, with like within the larger context, but he kept going back to this example where he's building a boat, and like someone asked him, "Hey Thompson, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm building a boat." And like they're like, "Oh, okay, well, what else?" And like, and what he's supposed to basically be making you think about is like, what the hell is intention? Like what are we actually doing? And like the only way that we can make judgments or moral determinations is by having some type of basic value structure and like some aboutness to what the hell we're doing here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you can break it into as many little bits as you want, or as big of a bit, but our problem is that we've broken it into all little tiny bits, and we're all trying to manipulate and control one another, and we don't even realize it a lot of times because it's just how we put food on the table now. And I just it's just a shame, because like I said in our last video, we have so much technological prowess and ability. We can build, like, we've had excavators for a long time. It's just they keep getting misused, because we're not able to instill the more fundamental understanding of how they work, and then like how you then use them to apply to a vision.
Right.
Like the vision is like the what aboutness, like what are we doing this is just completely lost. Everyone's doing their own thing and like has no sense of cohesion. And I'm not saying that, oh, we need to live in communes and all like have the same thoughts and obey, direct. Like I think that unfortunately, like that's ironically kind of what's happened now. Like it's just you can't see it because you're just so deep within it. It's like consume, obey, go to work, get in your box, go there. Like it's just like, holy shit, and like and this is why it drives me crazy when people try to say that we need to come back to our humanity and reject our instincts, and like I mean there's something to be said for delayed gratification, but that's different than like we like to think of delayed gratification as a human only thing. It's like, no, animals do that too. I mean they rear young, like it's just, and that's all instinctual. And it's like what's interesting is that, and I've been learning more about this, like some people just don't have qualia. Like they just miss certain types of qualia. Like sociopaths or psychopaths, they don't have empathy. Like they don't feel something when they cause someone else pain or suffering. Like people who are colorblind, they don't see certain colors. They only have a certain spectrum. And then there's a really interesting couple. I can't remember the inner voice one, but the image visualization one is called aphantasia. And like people don't have a mental imagery, like they can't imagine things. And then some people can't, they have no inner dialogue, and it's just like how do we like get a better understanding of that and realize that this is what actually matters, like our qualia, the qualitative, the quality of our experience, that's really all that matters. And I bring up the fact that some people don't have it because it's like that's in some sense our most synthetic a priori information. Like we conversed about that a little bit, like first principles and like what should our values be based on. It's like now our values are based on red or blue, or you know what I mean, or anti-vax or vax. It's like one or the other, and neither one is actually talking about anything of substance. It's just a juxtaposition, really. And it's just such a shame because as we can see, we can get in contact and talk with one another in person, one-on-one, and things work out. But it's just like the short form reductionistic aspect of how we're communicating online now that is just like destroying our social fabric, So
it's very unnatural. It's very unnatural to be talking shit on YouTube, on some political YouTube video to some guy, because there's no way you would approach a person in real life. I mean, you could, but like you definitely treat people online differently than you do in person, or when you actually can see them face to face. And it is like a kind of abstraction because it doesn't feel like you're talking to a person. It feels like you're just talking to like a very limited view of who that person is and what that person is, based on a YouTube comment. So yeah, they're definitely right there. But I wanted to ask you, like, specifically, what do you, we've identified sort of the problem, and I agree with you that it is kind of like it is the direction our society is going in, very rapidly. Like the way things have changed in recent years is just completely insane, and we haven't really even caught our breath to just how crazy things have been. But what do you think? Where do you think it's going? What do you think, like, are the kind of like end game consequences of this? Is it just our basically? I mean, is it just our destruction, or is it like a society that nobody wants to live in? And what do you think? Where do you think this is going?
I mean, I really think that we're balancing on a knife's edge right now. And I think that a lot of people don't really understand that, and then like not only that, but it's like a hot knife, because like the people who have the potential to fix the problems have so many vested interests and self-interest that they won't do it. And I mean, it's like we can argue about like whether or not that's fundamental human nature, but it's like I personally think that's just defeatist. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
I think that that's basically allowing a tyrannical minority just get their fucking way. I mean, we talked a little bit about Elysium, like the movie, and like just the concept, and like trying to remember I can't remember the acronym now, but it's basically just an inequality of income and like resources index, and the US has one of the highest ever, and like it's interesting because that index is tied to like to powerful government and powerful prestige in the world. Like the Romans had a very high income inequality, okay, but they're very powerful, and generally these things go hand in hand.
Right.
And it's like I mean, this strategy has worked in the past, and I think that that's what's kind of happening now online. It's like this tyrannical bash the other guy over the head until he submits way of dealing with things is unfortunately very human. I mean, like, I mean, animals, sure, they'll kill each other and whatever, but it's like the concept of human beings warring over their version of this thing that they've never seen before and killing each other over it, sometimes not even over land or anything, just because they believe something. That's incredible. Like that, and like and it translates directly to how we're communicating with one another. I think like it's just mudslinging. It's just, I'm going to dissect and reduce your argument down to little bits, and then find one fallacy, and then dismiss your entire argument. And unfortunately, I think this is how philosophy has kind of gone. Academic philosophy, it's all reductionist. It's all reductionism. Science is reductionist. Oh, we just got to keep looking deeper and deeper, and eventually we'll understand everything. It's like, and in the same way as like, as the duck rabbit, like you're looking at one little tiny line on the bigger picture, you zoom out and you're like, oh shit, missed the whole point. You know what I mean? Like, and now as far as like where this is going to go, I mean, I hope to death that people are inquisitive and interested enough, and like, and frankly, desperate enough to just get the basic knowledge that they need to better navigate this world, and just be able to call bullshit when they see it, or like when they think it. Like I really think that there's a big problem with people not understanding just how invasive and in your face all types of technology is. And like, I mean, people are talking about it now because of smartphones. Right. People are seriously addicted to that shit. Okay, but like it's been a slow but actually pretty fast in the grand scheme of things, adoption of so many electronic products and ways of life now. We don't even understand how to live without any of that shit now. Yeah. Almost no one understands how it works fundamentally. And even a lot of people who are trained in engineering or science, like, are so specialized that they don't get a bigger picture. Yeah. And everyone's just fucking fighting with one another. Like, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about because I'm a specialist and I know, and they're probably right. But like, what's the usefulness in yelling at one another? Hence my last video, I tried to say, like, we should try to, give one another the time of day and try to make one another laugh, because it's a hell of a lot, more enjoyable. Like everyone's been in the lecture where the prof, teaches right out of the book and doesn't take questions and just fucking mumbles on, it's like, then you get people who are energetic and like try to, use interesting analogies and try to get people like moving and like conversing and talking about like, different ways to understand things. And it's just like, but that's not a reductionist way of teaching, and that's our way of teaching. Our way of teaching is, this is the right way, this is what's in the book, this is what's going to be on the test, get the right fucking answer, you know. And I mean, my way of describing like what's been going on for a while here is that, like, I might have mentioned this, like we rate people's usefulness on how fast they can screw in a light bulb, you know. And it's like, someone's just handing you the light bulb, it doesn't matter what color it is, and like, you're not allowed to ask questions. It's just like, there's a right answer and you got to do it faster, you're going to get left in the dust. And it's just like, it's just not right. I mean, it doesn't line up with our fundamental human values, you know. What it is that it lines up with the fundamental values of a very small minority that thrives in the system that we've built. That's what it is. You know, these people naturally rise to the top, and it's because that's what our society, you know, encourages.
It's trying to turn you into a functional person to serve their ends, essentially.
Yeah, you like in capitalism largely, and I mean, not just capitalism, any type of situation where you're in a company and like you're selling your work or your knowledge, you know, to an employer for like in a bigger picture. Shit, I just lost it. Yeah, what'd you say?
What did I say? Like, well, I mean, the fact that like when we go to school, we're being trained in a very specific way, and we're being told that it's to our benefit, but really it's so that certain companies have workers who can do specifically the thing they need to do. It's like you're being trained to serve some other person's ambitions.
You become the cog in the machine. Like you need to be able to know what these words mean, navigate this specific scenario, and do this specific thing. But you know, and you look at nothing else, because you know that's just going to cause complexity and problems. But the problem is that all of our machines are so complex now, and people are a part of them, but they don't know what part they are. Right. And so they're confused, and they feel out of control. So what's their solution? Their solution is to overinflate their own ego, and so that they feel like they have control over that. But then the problem with that is that then they have to vehemently defend that ego against any type of dissent, right? Yeah. So it's a catch-22, and like, I mean, just look at how, I mean, capitalism in and of itself is an awesome system. It makes a lot of sense, and it produces incredible results. But like, again, in the same way that we need to have hybridized, you know, thinking about creation, like I think we need to have hybridized government, and stop like reducing and labeling and categorizing, like, oh, you're a socialist, so la 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 la, like, or whatever. Yeah. You know, it's just like, come on, man. Like this is another thing. It's like, you know, we brand ourselves, or we like, I'm with the Republican brand, and that evokes an emotion and a tribal aspect to it, you know, or whatever. And it's like, people are, I think we talked about this a little bit via text, like people define themselves not by the functionality of their groups, but just by the groupness of it, just by the fact that they're in a group, you know,
also who they oppose.
And who they oppose. Yeah, it's a definition by a negative, you know. It's like what the fuck, man. And like the level of abstraction that you need to have that, and then like, and I think that's really telling of just how
that's true, that it requires an abstraction, but there's also a very, I mean, like, as weird as it sounds, it's a very natural thing to like want to feel a part of a group and to want to have an enemy, and like there's something very satisfying about like having the feeling of there being a bad guy. The problem is, like, with reality, is that it's not that simple. Like,
well, we're the bad guy, and that's right. The shadow, right? The shadow is within all of us, and like fundamentally the struggle is supposed to be, we help one another fight our own shadows. Yeah. And then by the end, we're all supposed to be victorious, but people are just having trouble, man. You know, like, and I don't blame them. Like, you know, I've seen it from the inside, like how fucking bad it can be. And like, it's just the problems, I will say, I will admit, and like, I sympathize, and like, and because I used to believe the same thing. It's just like, these problems are too big. They're too big, and like, and there's no way I can like get a good grasp on what's happening because I'm just one person, you know. But like, the other flip side of that is that we've had no better chance or opportunity to be able to do this and better be aware of what's going on and help people understand their lives and what they want out of them than now. Like, when we can communicate like this, and like, even if we only reach like 10 people, you know, if every 10 in every 10 people, you know, there's one group of people, one or two people that work together and communicate and conversate like this, then, you know, that really can make effective change, I think, you know. And it's new, like, it hasn't existed, you know. Like, this is a new frontier, like, you know, the ability for us to communicate, like, this is the silver lining. This is the only silver lining. Like, it's destroying us, and it's honestly like a caricature of the bigger problem, really. You know, the internet is like, was a mistake, you know, or like, it wasn't really meant necessarily to, or at least it was meant to connect people in some sense, like in certain people's envisioning of it. But
Yeah.
like the reason why it became so big so fast was because people saw profit in it, right? But now, and it's destroying us, but it can also save us. So it's just like any tool, but we're misusing it. And like, so damn.
Well, it's very unintended. Like the consequences, like nobody could have predicted that these would have been the consequences, because like it's such a bizarre, unnatural thing, the internet, and such a like well, I mean, of course, one, I don't even understand it, but two, it's just like it's a frontier that, it's like you said, it's like a frontier we've never explored really. What this whole internet thing actually is, and we can all see the consequences. We can all see like what it does to our minds, and the social media is just so pathetic. Like how we have to like present our Instagram like, I don't give a shit what you ate last night. Like, but like we think people do. We think that people are interested in things, so like, we can create these online personas and just it's very bizarre.
Well, I think that that's actually kind of like a lie that we tell ourselves in that situation. It's really about our own gratification and a feeling of control, and that like, okay, I'm acceptable. I have validation. And it's like it isn't so much about like you're like. That's what's so sad about it. It's almost just it's like a keeping up with the Joneses type of a thing. It's like that like people don't really care, but like you're so afraid of not being in the in crowd, or not being accepted, or just being on the wrong track, that we do this weird shit.
It's so weird. It's so weird, and we don't even know how, like, maybe the people who are like into it don't even know how weird it is, because it's the norm. Like whatever the norm is, it just seems normal, even though in reality, on sort of the time scale of the universe, it's a very bizarre event.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, in my humor video, I talk about just like the context and how important it is. And just, I mean, you can so blatantly and clearly see like how and the repercussions of it, how much our context has been deteriorated and abstracted and reduced with online communication. But like even before that, it was the written word. You know what I mean? And then there's still face-to-face verbal communication. Like there's so much lost in the wordage, and our own definitions of the words, and our own personal experiences, and like what different words refer to. I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster. Without having a long form, you have no context. And then it's just back to this like data quantitative, like, oh well, I pull out this tweet and cherry pick all this information and completely out of context, and now this person's invalid. They can't even like come back from it a lot of times, like at least. And I'm not saying that like, oh, people get canceled and then they're like they can't say anything. That's not true. It's just like, well, the problem is that they people will just write them off and just not listen at all. And like and just not even try to understand why they think something. That's another key. It's like, and it's kind of it's a misnomer. It's not really correct, but like the idea that everyone is perfectly rational. It's just based on their specific perspective and the value of what they perceive, and that they arbitrarily add, basically, and like in the grand scheme, like is my ego more important than the actual facts? A lot of times I think in this country right now, the ego is more important, than like what's actually going on, because people are just terrified of accepting the idea that like that things could go wrong. And like, I mean, look, they are going wrong. They're going very wrong.
One thing I want to ask you though, like, I mean, this is a point I brought up with another podcaster. I forgot what his podcast was called, but but like we were talking about the cycles of sort of orders and chaos that go through the universe and go through human societies. And of course, like we can see our current situation as a very tumultuous, fluctuating time. Like it hasn't, I mean, I don't want to like make super dark predictions, but I see this as kind of the cusp of a very dark storm that's kind of heading our way. But of course, it's that kind of chaotic state where like things go to shit, where like a brand new kind of world can emerge from that. Like we can, I think it's pretty obvious that chaos is kind of like the fertile soil from which a new order emerges. So do you you see like the potential for that? Because there is always the potential of chaos that's so destructive and so overwhelming. Before I elaborate on that, there's one thing that you said before that I want to pick up on, was the fact that like it seems like our society is overcomplicated to the point where like if like say for example like if a solar flare happened or like some sort of electromagnetic pulse that shut off all of our technology and like for example completely disable the internet, we wouldn't know what to do. And like none of us kind of like, because we're so adapted to the world in which we currently live, and it's so complicated, and we're so specialized for such very specific roles that if something like that were to happen, we wouldn't be able to cope and adapt to it. So like there's a kind of destruction that kind of just destroys everything and nothing is left. But then there's a kind of like destruction where an old system is broken down and then something new emerges. And I guess what I want to ask is, what do you think would emerge from the kind of chaos that we're currently living in? Would it be something worse than our current situation, something better? You know, obviously we all hope for the better. So like, what would your ideas be of kind of the worst scenario and the best scenario?
The worst scenario is a scenario where, I mean, like in that Elysium movie, I mean, it's kind of unnerving, like how well they nail it, I think. You know, I mean, it's not like it's a masterpiece or anything, but like, you know, and I mean, we see it. I mean, it's going on right now. It's just they just have a little bit more tech. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just a little bit further far gone, it seems like. Now, the way that could be rectified, perhaps, I think that there's two major, like there's a goal, there's something that needs to happen, like which has constituent parts, but then there's tools. Like I think that like I said, I think that humor and you know, like just getting a better picture of like what we're doing here, like trying to connect with people rather than reduce them or categorize them and like tell them why they're wrong and logic them to death, you know, like rather than doing that, like we need people, frankly, like you and me, I think, who are okay and interested in just, if it's something new and something that I could learn, then I want to do it, and I want to learn about it, and I'm going to pursue that knowledge. And I like, look, not everyone needs to be a polymath, and like it's arguable that it's not possible in today's day and age because of that inherent complexity. But like I think that we really need to abandon like this idea that, okay, like you have a job and you know you go to work and you do that job for a salary, and then you come home and then you know and then you get advertised to, and then on the weekend you go and spend all that money, like and like how many people live just to get plastered on the weekends, you know, and forget it all, and then you know rinse and repeat. And like I see it as just being sad, you know, like I think that there are better alternatives, and I think that it's a lot of mental manipulation and putting and convincing people that they enjoy the mental prisons that they've been put in. You know, I think that we need people who are interested in just learning more because for the sake of it, and also for the sake of the planet and for one another. You know, if you have an interest in something technically or you know functionally helpful, you know, to society, then it's going to be the day and age like where intellectual property and idea property is just, it's not going to exist anymore. It is happening in a number of fields. Okay, like in access controls, I was just talking to a guy, like, you know, 20 years ago, it was invite only. Like you needed, like all their shit was proprietary, and they would only train you on their equipment, you know, if you were a part of their association. And like, but now it's a free for all. You can't do that. You know, I mean, like Apple makes it difficult for people to get schematics for their products, you know, like even repair shops and shit. And, you know, they fight and whatnot, but like, we need people to have a better understanding of the tools that are at our disposal, and then like, and then the whataboutness to fucking do with them. Okay. And like, and I'm not saying everyone needs to, you know, be a plumber, an electrician, and this and that, and know everything and know how to fix anything. And like, no, but we do need to open our minds, have a learning type attitude, have an attitude where we're not just going to try to shut people down. We're going to assume that they know something that we don't. And, you know, just have it, like I said, if there's like a group of 10 people that are connected to one another, and, you know, hopefully those 10 people know two or three functional things, and, you know, and how to like work on a house, which, you know, these most fundamental basic human needs, like, or like how to grow a plant or like anything. Like, we need to just get out of our heads the idea that, oh, I can just go and this paper in my pocket is going to be able to do whatever I need. Because all of that is based on the idea that society is functioning. You know, the paper is not inherently valuable at all. You know, I mean, even things like gold, you know, like I argue with my father-in-law, like he thinks that you know, like, and I'm saying, like, you know, having a gold standard and the fact that there's only so much gold and blah blah blah, like, you know, that's an aspect of it, but gold itself is not really inherently valuable. It
No,
doesn't
it's not.
do anything very functional, right? Like it's useful in certain very niche electronic, you know, applications. You know, functionally speaking, silver is a lot more valuable, you know,
Right.
but it's more abundant. It's like, think about how weird of a mind game even just that is. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, how you know, how tricky that is. Like, oh, I have this gold chain and this signifies my wealth and my status, and it has no other value inherently really than that, but like that in and of itself is valuable. Like that's a good example. It's like, it's like, oh, did you get the new AirPods? Did you get the new game? You know, did you hear the new album? Or, and like that's probably a bad example. Music, I think, is a great thing, is a beautiful thing that has really exploded and is, you know, that makes me happy, because I think the music is kind of a situation where it's hard to misuse the instruments,
Right.
you know, like because
Well,
it's
would that
just
also include like the commercialization of music and stuff?
well, nah.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't,
it.
yeah, not that, but I mean, just like that, the fact that there's a lot of it and there's a lot of really good music, and people
Yeah.
who, you know, otherwise may have not had the opportunity or ability to make music were able to, you
Right.
know, that's a good example of like how our modernization has actually, you know, maybe increased, you know, beauty in our world. You know, like certain instruments and tools that we've created have really, you know, like maybe this maybe is also a bad example because of like how it's been interpreted, but you know, like the telescope and understanding the cosmos. It's like, you know, and then the problem arises when we forgot about the wonder of all of that. And then we're like, oh yeah, just a bunch of rocks floating, and here's the algorithm, here's the function, you know,
Right.
like, and it's like, and it completely, you know, takes the wonder out of it because you're making it that way. You know, you're categorizing it, you're abstracting it, and you're saying, you know, this is a straight line, or this is a box, or this is that, and you know, or whatever. I mean, fundamentally, we you know, we crave food, water, shelter, protecting our family, protecting our, you know, our things to an extent, but you know, that's another thing. It's like, how many fucking things do we need, and like
Right.
what's actually valuable to us, you know? Like I try to think about, you know, my spending of my money and whatnot, and just how I live my life in terms of experiences and not in material assets, you know, like, because you're like, fundamentally we're here to experience, we're not here to have, you know.
Right.
um but I think that's kind of like the picture. We need to, we need people who have a knack for different things to be open to the idea of sharing them with other people in a constructive and patient way, and then like coming up to one another's aid, you know, when we're in legitimate stress and trouble, you know. And like that's I mean, it comes out of my mouth and it sounds simple and easy, but it's like it's not.
No.
You know. um I think that we're doing the important work, and I think that, you know, like, as stupid and as condescending as it might sound, like, you know, just if you have an inkling to do a podcast, or like, or have a conversation, you should fucking do it, because you know, out of these abstract reductionistic, you know, words that we're spewing at one another, we can get a better understanding of one another, and maybe the world a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
and how we can work together in it a little bit better. And I don't know, maybe just reevaluating exactly what the shadow is, and like how it would look, and like how close what we're looking at right now is what to, like, is that, like, is it
Right.
that? Because I don't know. I mean, growing up, I was miserable, you know, for a lot of different reasons, but like it, I look back at like some of those reasons, and I see a lot of validity, you know, and I see, like, whether people are consciously aware of it or not, like a lot of people just like not understanding why they're so upset, or like why they're not happy. And I think that that's why, like, there's so much anger, like with the protests and just everything. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, clearly there's specific agendas that they have, but then, like, you know, with the lockdown, there's been theorization and speculation that like a lot of people fucking were out there, you know, who are especially like rioting and looting and like breaking shit, just like not knowing what the fuck to do. So they're just like, burn it all down, you
Mhm.
know, and maybe we'll start some kind of, you know, movement, or you know, something, just so that we can stop being lied to, because that's what it feels like. You know, it seems like just everyone's just trying to lie to you, to manipulate you into, you know, buying their particular version of whatever you don't need, you know. um uh I just, we get it shoved down our throat that we, you know, we need to have a nice house and a picket fence and yada yada yada, blah blah blah, XYZ 1 2 3, and it's just,
Mhm.
I don't see any utility in that. And like, I mean, I'm at a crossroads right now in my own life, in that I started my own business because of COVID. I couldn't find a job, and in the process, I taught myself online, and this is relevant, like PCB design. I taught, like, I can look up and program Arduino. I bought a 3D printer, and I just kind of tinkered around with the 3D CAD software until now I can, make stuff. And it's like I have like 4 or 5 prototypes that I want to get patents for, or like, try to make some money with. But it's like, is it that I want to make money and have a jet ski? Not really. Like I really just want to get the idea out there. And like, and I'm struggling with this like contentedness thing. It's like, how much do I need? Like I'm comfortable in that. Like I have a good boss. I don't make a ton of money, but it's a relaxed, day job. And then like I have my little tinkering projects on the side with my own business. It's just like, do I want to make my life about, patenting and inventing and like working within this giant machine, and frankly propagating it, and propping it up because I'm participating in it. It's just, or do I try to, or am I happy, with what I have? And like, is there no more drive for like more material shit, and like what I'm finding is that I'm not looking for more material shit. It's just like, it's an unfortunate circumstance that like, in order for me to build the things that I need to build, I need the stuff,
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know. I know that a lot of people really are truly and fundamentally motivated by money and power, and I mean, that is kind of like a really weird concept to me, and like this, it comes back to like the idea of like people having different qualia. Like we are wired differently, like I'm not motivated by money in that respect. Like I look around here and I'm like, I have most of what I want and what I need. Like and now it's just like, it's the thought process and the talking with you and the thinking about, these different concepts that's like what's really fulfilling and interesting to me now. It's
Yeah.
not like, it's not filing for the patent and,
Well, I think it's fulfilling for most people. I think like that kind of like the like thinking about these things deeply and like and contemplating our circumstances rather than just randomly just arbitrarily accepting it is like a very important thing, a very satisfying thing, and much more satisfying than the acquisition of material goods. People think that's what they want, but I know a decent number of fairly affluent people who are miserable because they're so obsessed with just attaining these material goods and they just don't feel satisfied by it because they expected it to sort of fill some sort of desire that they had, but what they really needed was just connection, was connecting with another person. But of course, the kind of person who goes really far and becomes like a really successful business person, they're good at connecting with people, but only as a means to an end. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like they're good at like using
business.
Yeah, exactly. Business, right? Like you make a connection, but you don't make a connection because of, for the sake of the connection itself, but because it serves a higher purpose of getting something out of that person, of them serving you in some way. And so like when you live in the world in that kind of state, you don't really, what people really need, what people you really want is connection with other human beings. And that's probably the most satisfying thing you can get out of life. Like a lot of people who are lonely are obviously very depressed, but and we can see why, because we're, as a social species, we do sort of crave a sense of connection. And an understanding with other people. And I don't see why so many people don't get that, and why they're so convinced that the acquisition of material goods and getting a big house and like having the best computer and having like all the consoles and I don't know that's necessarily what rich people go after. Like I guess like a yacht and stuff.
That's what you want.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's personally what yeah. But like it never satisfies to the extent that people think it's going to satisfy. And it's funny how very few people realize this. What you need in life to be happy is to, in my opinion, or like to have your basic needs fulfilled. So like you have food, you have shelter, and then beyond that, what your psyche really craves is other people and the connection with other people and understanding people deeply, and not just very oftentimes we feel like we need to argue with somebody when we think we're right and we think that we're right and we think that they're wrong, and so we try to beat them down and try to like make them think that they're wrong and that we're right. But usually that never really satisfies to the extent that people think it does, because it just feels like both people in an argument end up being hurt, when really, like, when you try to understand their perspective and why they see the world, you get a lot more done with that, rather than trying to hold on to your own ego and sort of push their ego down, I think, at least.
Sure. I think in academic philosophy, it's like everything is responses. It's just like, I'm going to respond to this and respond to that, and like, talk about this specific thing or blah blah blah. And it like, I think it's like kind of like, it's like looking at 2 seconds of a 2-second clip of a song. You know, like you're not getting the whole picture, and it, and in and of itself, it doesn't really mean anything. You know, like you know, the duck rabbit idea, and like from what you're saying about happiness, just like, sure, you need your most basic fundamental needs met, and then like beyond that, it's a zen. Like it's like, you know, yesterday I got all burnt. I was sitting out in front of the smoke shop, and I'm just thinking to myself, this, you know, I could be sitting here like, oh, I got to pay that bill, I got to do this, you know, this person's probably pissed off, or, you know, whatever else. I could be sitting there that, or like thinking about that, or I could, you know, the idea of meditation, maybe not necessarily meditation, but just enjoying, you know, the sun, enjoying the breeze,
Yeah.
just, you know. But like we don't, and there definitely is a huge backlash. And I mean, people are, it's frankly out of fucking necessity, because people are so miserable and they don't know what to do. It's like, you know, and it's a trope, and it's, you know, people like to make fun of them, but it's like, oh, do hot yoga, or you know, meditate, or this, or do that, you know. And like, and people are really trying to help themselves, and it's commendable, I think. But like, you know, on that commendability, I also have to say, like, you shouldn't have to be fucking doing that, because, you know, it isn't so much your fault, you know, that you can't function, or that you're unhappy in a broken system that benefits the very few, you know what I mean? And so that's just another form of like controlling the narrative, or controlling the picture, you know, that we're getting spoon fed. It's like, you know, the idea of antidepressants, but, you know, marijuana is illegal. You know, it's just like, it's silly things like this, you know, like even the idea of an antidepressant. Here, take this specific fucking chemical that we synthesize. It's one chemical, that's it, right? Meanwhile, you know, anything in nature is so complex when you ingest it. You know, like any type of plant has so many different interchanging parts. Like just that reductionistic aspect of like, here, take this will fix it. You know, like, and that's everything. Everything is just a quick fix, because we don't have time to actually analyze anything, because we've ramped up our RPMs on this big consumerist machine so damn fast.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I think that I think this idea of figuring out how to ride our dragons is probably the best way to look at it. You know, because like, you know, like we're beyond the point where we can just slay the dragon. You know, like we can just, all right, you know, I'm not going to be advocating for you know, all technology needs to go. Like that's not what I'm saying at all. Like I'm saying kind of the opposite. Like, yes, it is like technology is a dark gift, or like a dark concept, and like, but it is of us, and just because it's dark doesn't mean that we aren't, you know, good in the greater picture of creation and the universe, right? Like I just this morning I had a migraine, but I was watching this video about the Unabomber, and like a lot of like what it was ironic, because like a lot of what I'm saying right now is like some of his reasoning. You know, the one guy is Elul, who he sounds like a really interesting guy. That was who inspired the Unabomber, right? Ellul, I think was his last name. Don't know anything about him, but basically he was saying like technology, technique, algorithm, like, you know, all of this stuff is reductionistic stuff, and like and we've lost sight of the bigger picture. And like the Unabomber's response was, okay, well, you know, all technology and post-industrial creation is bad and wrong, and we need to, you know, reject all of it, and just throw the baby out with the bathwater, in my view. You know, like we can't just try to keep slaying this dragon. It doesn't go away. It is of us. It is us. You know, we need to learn how to channel it, and be more aware of what type of creation we're creating at what time, you know, and for what goal. Like just some examples of like hybridized creation that I see, like clever architecture, you know, like especially that incorporates aspects of the environment around it, you know, like the idea of like envelope homes, or like, you know, like a water mill or something like that, like in the olden days for like flour milling and shit like that. You know, it's like we used to be at least a lot more sustainable, and like now it's just like, oh yeah, engine gets 20% efficiency on this fucking gas that we had to refine and drive all over the place that we pulled out of the ground. And it's like, it's so abstract and so far out of sight and out of mind. It's like that we can cope with it, you know. And a lot of these things I think are coping mechanisms, and that gets played on too in all of this. It's like, that's sick, you know, that's pretty sick, you know, when advertisement, it's like, if you think about it, like, here, this product will make you feel this way, people will then use that to cope with their daily lives, and then that reinforces that behavior. It's just like, wow, you know. And it's just, I think that it is human nature that this is always going to continue to happen, but we need to be able to talk about it in a quick and efficient way, and just, be able to call bullshit when we see it, and that's going to be the solution, not just blow it all up, or like, so destruction and then rebuild it. It's like, no, we can't just destroy everything. We got to reform shit.
Well, because I mean, we shouldn't destroy everything because it makes the assumption that everything was bad. I mean, there are definitely bad aspects to it, but there are also definitely positive benefits. What we need to do is to kind of like filter the process, like, okay, what's so bad about our technology, and what's good about it, and sort of, refine the good elements while also like understanding how to cope with the bad elements, because there are definitely bad elements to it. It's just like, again, it has to do with their, like, I'd say it has to do with an incompatibility between like what we are fundamentally, like, because we're fundamentally just, we're just animals. That's what we are at a fundamental genetic level. And the kind of mismatch between that and what we are, and society itself and what society imposes upon us. Like, again, like this your idea of sort of riding the dragon and taming the dragon, is a kind of cooperation between these two elements, not necessarily them being antagonistic to each other, but like them working together to ultimately achieve a better aim. And that's kind of what we need to do in society, because we are kind of like pushing ourselves quite far, in terms of just kind of repressing the shadow and repressing what we are. Because this, if you pay attention enough in history, you realize that there are times in history where the tension snaps, where people basically go back to being what they really are, like, and that's the kind of danger of society, that could happen. And so there has to be a way to deal with this problem. And we're kind of at this point in history where we know, like, where we've acknowledged this fact. Like, for most of it's kind of crazy to think, for most of human history, people didn't know that they were fundamentally animals. And then we discovered that. I mean, when you think about it, it is a very bizarre thing, and it is sometimes like a very scary thing. But it's also a fact that we have to recognize, and a fact that, like, we need to find a solution for. And I feel like a lot of people today don't recognize this fact as well as they should. I mean, a lot of people acknowledge evolution as a true fact, but they don't really grapple with what that really means. It means that your ego is just a thing in your head which you believe about yourself. The rest of you is really just this ape. Like, that's what you really are. And that's like, and I don't think people are grappling with that enough. Because once you recognize that fact, it is like acknowledging the shadow. And I guess that's kind of the path towards it becoming a more constructive force rather than perceiving it as a destructive force, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like, you perceiving and then trying to maintain or control, rather than taming, like you said, or utilizing to your advantage. We've toyed around with this idea a little bit. But I did want to bring this up. I was really curious what you thought. Like, I mean, this does tie in to an extent to like what's happening right now in the news with UFOs, frankly, in my opinion. Like, I mean, think whether you like believe whether or not whether you want like that alien civilizations have been here for a long time, or like even that they're up there in general, or like maybe all of these, which is very unlikely, like this footage is fake or not fake, but just misguided. It's just like weird data anomalies that we don't understand, or there's like some group of like super scientists somewhere on the planet that we don't know about. But like, in all of this, it's like, if either of those are the case, what's going to be impressive or like incentivize some super hyper advanced race or civilization of aliens to want to interact or help us whatsoever? It's going to be our ability to cooperate with one another. Like, we've already demonstrated that we have, like pretty impressive technology, and we've it's so impressive and powerful that we're in the process of destroying ourselves and our planet. And like, I think that they look at that and they see just such a damaging, problematic lopsidedness that like they don't know how to maybe they don't know how to intervene. But regardless of anything, like, it's going to be the way that we organize ourselves and our philosophical beliefs that are going to be, and just our understanding of reality, not just physically, because they already understand it physically, right? They would already understand it more, at least more than us physically. It's like, it would be how we maintain and organize our experiences with one another, and like, and like what we value. And it's just like, I think that we're not, I haven't heard many people think of it that way, you know, like, or they're just like, oh, are the aliens going to tell us stuff? Or they like, why aren't they communicating, or are they communicating, or what's up? It's like, I mean, dude, it's so bad that like this shit is on the news, and it's like, and we're still distracted by our political, you know,
Yeah.
pettiness and bullshit. You know, it's similar to you bringing up, you know, just the DMT experience and the possibility of another dimension. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
people have been talking about this shit, and it's like la 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 la, and everyone's just got their blinders on. They're like,
Yeah, it's
profit,
crazy.
Coca-Cola, like what the fuck,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Um, it's just like, I mean, whether they're interfering or whatever, I don't know. What have you read much about it, or seen anything about it, and like,
Yeah,
what's your take
I
on
have
that?
I have a like a decent number of thoughts about it. That this would be so just fun to talk with you about. But I've thought about like a lot of things. First of all, I'm fairly convinced that they're legit because you know, because it's been, it's not, to be honest, it's not that like if we discovered aliens, it wouldn't be that surprising. Like we live in a very big universe. Like there's a huge number of planets. I also think like, why are they here? I mean, what, like imagine if you were an alien and you discovered a planet and you saw these monkey men building cars and building buildings. Like wouldn't you not want to like watch that? Like I can imagine like their perspective being among the most interesting possible, just watching this whole thing unfold from like wherever they are, just seeing buildings and cities come into being, building like highway networks and stuff. It would be an incredible thing from the aliens perspective to just watch this happen. But I mean, would you think that they're trying to interact with us, or that they're trying to be kept hidden?
I think that
Because yeah.
I think there would only be a couple of reasons why they would be interested in us. I think that I really lean towards one specifically. I think that it would have to do with their interest in our sense qualia,
Mhm.
and like what our experience is actually like, you know, like, because it could be theorized maybe that when life develops on other planets, that different types of qualia are produced, you
Right.
know, like even though there's like a like, you know, there's fundamental laws of physics, like even just like in the butterfly effect aspect, like one little tiny difference at one time like could maybe, you know, produce very very different qualia. And like what my ambition and interest, you know, with the DMT thing is, and what I mentioned to you is like, if they have extra qualia in that dimension, then me as a fucker engineer would be like, how can I get that qualia here in this dimension, or something like that, you know? And like maybe in their mind, they're like, you know, we think and theorize what it would be like to be an octopus. It'd be very different, you know, than being us. They have, you know, they have 8 brains or whatever, right? They might be interested in like, oh, they might be thinking, how does their brain work in such a way that it produces this experience, and can we theorize what kind of qualia they're having based on that structure?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they might be interested in that, and then they might also be interested in just the only real type of technology that I think that they would be interested in us having would be our philosophical technology, you know, like frankly how good we are to one another and how good of experiences we create for one another. I think that there's a transcendent idea and like understanding that you eventually get to, and that I think that any transcended, you know, alien race, at least some of them, like the ones that would be here and like doing the diplomacy and the philanthropy or whatever you want to call it, if they're doing that, you just kind of realize that experience is the most fundamental aspect of existence, and that like the idea that like a tree falls in the woods doesn't make a sound. It's like, you know, the only like all this physical shit could exist in a vacuum and be, you know, moving around and doing and interacting with, but if it doesn't create an experience, then it's kind of not worthwhile or useful. Like that's the fundamental utility in it, right? Like consciousness doesn't create the universe to not experience itself, you know, like, so they might be just interested in just like our meta knowledge, like how good we are to and how much we understand about our own reality and conscious experience. Because I think that like the idea that and this is, you know, another criticism of like our materialistic science, you know, based like outlook on the world, just this idea that, oh, you know, you're talking about metaphysics, you can't prove any of this. And oh, this is something else I wanted to bring up too. I said when you talked about when we were talking about the telephone experiment, that it's science, you know, that it's scientific. Mm-hmm. And I did want to talk to you about that a little bit, because in some senses it isn't science, because or it can be debated, because I'm sure you've heard of Popper, right? Karl Popper. Mm-hmm. You know, falsifiability. That's a big one, right? So like, how could we ever really falsify like that experiment, you know, like when there's a fundamental aspect of like indeterminate effort or just navigation, and that like we're literally interacting with another dimension. So like how could we ever prove that it wouldn't be possible to do the transaction of the word, you know, like it's tricky, you know, like maybe a better way to explain it is that it's scientific. Okay. And then like we need to have a better conversation. I think this is another part of like what we need to actually do is just understand that science isn't just end all be all, you know. Science and Satan are kind of get together, like we've been toying and talking about a little bit. Yeah. But like, you know, we can use that tool to our advantage, but it's not just, it isn't dogmatic. And like, you don't just get to read one study, you know, or even a bunch of peer reviewed studies, unfortunately, in today's day and age, because they could all be funded by the same interest group. Right. You know, so it's very tricky, you know, like I think that fundamentally our rationality is going to be like incredibly important. And it's ironic because you know, rationality is kind of might be the fundamental aspect of the reductionistic, you know, an abstracting way of thinking, but it's in tandem with reevaluating our fundamental values, you know, and like trying to see the world for what it actually is, and not just seeing it for Coca-Cola, you know. So like, yeah, we need to reduce things back down to the idea that, you know, experience is the most fundamental and most important thing by using our experience itself, right, as the proof, right? Yeah. So just so it, like the idea of it being science, I don't know, but like what is really interesting about it is that if even though we can't falsify it, if we did it, then it proves it. So it's like, yeah. which is really weird, you know. And that's
I guess the false aspect is if we fail to prove it, but that's not necessarily falsibility. It's just kind of ambiguity. It's like we don't have a conclusion, whereas like if we confirm it, then we do have a conclusion. So yeah, it is a weirder experiment than any other experiment ever performed.
Yeah, well, possibly, for sure, yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because falsifiability is supposed to be a prerequisite for any type of valid scientific hypothesis. You know, if it can't be falsified in many people's minds, then it isn't a valid scientific hypothesis. But there's weird edge cases like this where it's like, yeah, okay, the experiment isn't falsifiable necessarily, but in the situation where the experiment is exacted and it works, then it actually does prove something, you know. Maybe it's so weird. Yeah. But just we definitely need to give up this idea that, you know, you read an article and you know the truth, and then you can bash someone else over the head with it and argue with them all day, you know. Yeah. It's a little bit more complicated than that. We need to, rather than, you know, do that, we need to kind of just talk more about what we're experiencing as day-to-day humans a little bit more. Yeah. I don't know. I think we did a pretty good job of like talking about this and articulating, you know, like the general concept. I don't know how much we like, you know, agree necessarily, but you know, just this idea that the shadow isn't, like maybe getting better acquainted with the idea of what the shadow is, and like even if it's not in the traditional sense, like maybe we can come up with a new word for what I'm talking about, or like you know, like the different interplay between these types of creation, and like what type of, you know, what types of egos and just all types of technology and creation that we want to make. But I don't know. I don't think I had many other questions for you, man. Do you have any questions right now?
I mean, I think I like have a decently good understanding of what you're trying to get at and kind of the problems of society, but also like, you know, what the function of the shadow is in society and how we should cope with it. And also like, you know, so no, I think I do have like a good sense of what you mean. And like, I think it is really important to like talk about it, and like, because again, we can have these ideas in our mind, but like we need to sort of flesh them out. One of the things about conversations and like just philosophy in general is that like it kind of makes explicit things which are just kind of floating in our mind, and that way other people can experience them also. So, you know, that's like one of the sort of motivations for me kind of having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, something else I did want to touch on, like just the way that we're learning, and like, and also something else that I think is a misnomer, and that is very frustrating. We have this idea, especially in America. I don't know if it's as bad in Canada, but like everything is natural, acute, like natural talent, or like that. If you're either good at something or you're not. And like I think this ties into the idea of memory, and that like people think, oh, I have a shitty memory or whatever, and it's like I think that there's so much wasted potential and a lot of like mental anguish and suffering caused by that idea, and like I've watched multiple professors and sociologists and yada yada like talk about how in other countries like they don't have this mentality. It's just like they have them, like Japan was the example. Like why is it that especially like Asian American students in particular are just crushing mathematics, and it's because their culture is and like the way that they're taught is that you do this and it'll be really slow and it'll suck at first, but eventually it'll get easier, and you can eventually get the right answer, and you can eventually master this and be good at it. Right. And like it's just a fundamental way of thinking about things, and like that attitude, of like whether you're gonna, it's like, do you or don't you, do you accept the simpler, more abstract and like shadow reaction that you're going to have sometimes, or are you going to like open your mind and like try to be open to the idea that you might not be good at this right now, but you'll be good at it later. And then like that ties into memory. Like people say, oh, I have a bad memory. Well, I think that like memory and like my memory has gotten better, over time. And like I and not in the way that like, oh yeah, I remember, I'm like thinking about, oh, I got to remember that I walked down the street, or that I got in the car. Like, what did I do today? Or what did I eat for breakfast? It's like, why are you trying to remember that? Like a lot of it is not necessary. Right. And like, and think about how kids would try to remember stuff in school, like with acronyms and like, which oftentimes were fucking meaningless. Right. And for some reason that would be the way that they would remember. What the secret is that like, I see knowledge and creation is like a and acquisition of it is like a puzzle. Like, and I don't know if I told you about this analogy, but it's like you do, if you are smart about it and you build your line, your edges and your corners before you do the middle, then like it's a lot fucking easier to fill in the middle, right. And different disciplines and different ways of thinking and different skills that you acquire, like getting edges and corners of the puzzle. And then like the beauty is like once you get those fundamentals, the picture that can fill in the middle can be unique and interesting, right. And beyond that, like this plays into memory, because why would you try to remember something like based on an acronym that just rhymes or something like that? Like, it's so much better to, like, in my experience, to try to memorize and understand how electricity works, basing it on my interaction physically with water, and like the thing is the more things that you really that you have in your mind as a good model, the more connections that you can make. And that's what memory really is. It's like it's a reconstruction, based on old connections and categorizations and referrals, so like the more things that you have to refer to, the more things that you have to access, then the easier it is to file it somewhere that makes sense, rather than this weird convoluted fucking acronym that doesn't mean anything. What I'm saying? So like my key is this. I think that people need to stop trying to make themselves attend to what people are telling them to attend to, and just attend to what they find like interesting, and then try to understand things in the terms of the things that they find interesting, and that they already know to some extent, rather than just brute forcing and treat like teaching things in a vacuum. It's like, no wonder people think they have a bad memory. Right. It's like, how useful really is episodic memory? I don't think, especially in today's day and age, it's like, I don't know. I mean, it can be argued.
It has its uses, but it's not of prime significance, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, has it ever really been for humans? Mm-hmm. Not that much. Like what's really powerful is the ability to take an episodic event, remember specific important details about it, and then be prepared for a similar event in the future. It's not just like, oh yeah, that happened, or whatever, and like here's all the details about it, without any type of connection or leap as to what kind of conclusions we can draw. Like, oh yeah, Bob got attacked by the tiger over there down in that pit. Okay, better go over there and walk over there and see it. Like, it's not helpful just to remember or know that. You gotta be able to create something useful out of it, right? So right. Like, and we don't do that. It's just, here, try to episodically remember all these different random fucking facts and then spit them out to
pointless. Me. I mean, yeah, it's really pointless. I mean, I guess every once in a while it'll have its uses, but I think, yeah, for the most part, it is overemphasized, and there are much more important things, much more
Well,
important skills like bodily memories. Like, when you play, like if you're playing an instrument or something, it's not as if you remember each note. It just kind of comes to you. It's ingrained in your nervous system. You don't have to bring it up to memory. But again, it seems like our way of testing people is to see how good they are bringing up really pointless random trivia facts.
but yeah, and like the specific way that and everyone remembers it the same way.
Yeah.
Like if you don't remember it the right way, then you're wrong. It's like, what the fuck? Like, why? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like in the situation of like specific events, then yeah, okay, you're wrong, whatever. But like when it comes to just like engineering or like different functional aspect, like, oh, you're cutting the grass wrong, or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. People are just so obsessed with fucking doing things the right way and telling everyone else that they're doing it wrong. It's like,
Yeah.
and that's just the narcissism, and comes back to the shadow, and like how we're so wrapped up in all of that, and it's just sad. I think we have the capacity and the ability to turn it around and make this work, but damn.
Yeah.
It's funny, like when you make that connection, you're like, oh shit, like we have been tricked. Like that's how I feel right now. Like I feel like we've been tricked into believing a lot of things are good for us that aren't, and we got to start talking more about it.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I think it was a pretty good talk today.
Yeah. I like that it was more focused than the last one. I mean, the last one was good, but
it was all over the place.
Yeah. It's good to really make really dig into like one topic and like really make it understood, or make it more explicit.
Yeah, I think we introduced and like opened Pandora's box in the first video, and now we're gonna like pick out specific little bits that are useful and could possibly help people just understand things a little bit better, and hopefully us understand things a little bit better. Yeah. But all right, man. Hey, it was great. Good seeing you, and we should plan this again soon. All right.
Yeah, awesome, man. Nice talking with you. Yeah, take care.
Peace out.
Peace.